Let's just quickly go into a really detailed analysis from moneyweb.co.za, which actually breaks down, for us to really understand what the problem is with ArcelorMittal, the clash between ArcelorMittal and the government of South Africa, and to really understand how to really comprehend this complex case of the loss of a job disaster or job catastrophe. First of all, we'll begin with this chart. This is a chart that actually argues, it actually shows the amount of import duties that are actually being placed on some commodities in the steel production industry. So it actually says that this is actually now the amount, the tariffs, import duties that are actually placed on collected from SARS, all right, of steel imports. So the amount of imports of steel being imported into South Africa actually goes through certain tariffs. They actually are taxed at the port of entry, all right. And so if you notice now, in the importation of steel into South Africa, they are categorized into three groups. There's the intermediate consumption, steel for intermediate consumption. What is intermediate consumption? It's actually defined as the goods that are actually used to produce the final product. All right, so it's still coming into South Africa comes in one part as goods for intermediate consumption. Then there are goods for gross fixed capital formation. So these are kind of like the steel products that actually enable the fixing of capital, so to speak. And then there's this final group which is now for final consumption. So this is probably steel products from China, India, finished product, steel that is actually finished completely and imported into South Africa for direct use. There's no need to reproduce, there's no need to refashion anything. It's just straight for direct use. All right, so now we see that the intermediate consumption products that actually are usually designated for intermediate consumption, they have the highest tariffs. All right, they're usually taxed more. All right, and now we see that the lowest tariffs is actually on those that is actually final consumption. So for example, if China kind of like decides to export some of its final finished goods, steel products, all right, they are taxed the least in South Africa. So it's easy to get these goods into South Africa and flood South Africa to the point where the companies in South Africa that actually produce steel would actually be paralyzed because there will be an influx of cheap steel products in South Africa. And this is actually what has actually happened to ArcelorMittal. All right, so this is the basis to really understand why ArcelorMittal is actually kind of like really fighting back and threatening to leave South Africa. And this problem with taxes now, these import duties, is coupled with Eskom's challenges in trying to really run an industrial company, so to speak. So Eskom, ArcelorMittal actually argues that they've been suffering a lot from electricity outtakes, and that has actually impacted their business a lot. But another thing I also found that's really unfortunate is the fact that ArcelorMittal actually received, it says here, it received 52.81% anti-dumping duty on structural steel. In other words, whenever they engage in the production of steel, there's usually probably some parts of the steel that has to be dumped somewhere. All right, so in order to allow for South Africa to allow them to dump that steel, probably at some waste or somewhere in South Africa, they have to pay to the tune of 52.81% duty, so to speak. So that's a major loss already going on amidst the problem with Eskom, and also these taxes, lower taxes, import duties on final steel imported goods from probably China or India and all that. So these are the challenges that you could hear Kobo's Verster actually complaining about, that the government should actually do something about it. But there was also another problem. There was also, added to the anti-dumping duty, there was also a 10% duty on imported long rolled steel, which actually also affected this business. So now they had to deal with 52.81%, and also an extra 10% duty on long rolled steel. I think they need this long rolled steel probably for some of their production processes. All right, so we can see that actually this is a business that is actually losing already at the onset. Then finally, the blow that actually seemed to have really crushed ArcelorMittal in South Africa was the fact that there's this problem with mini mills. All right, so it says here that many have blamed ArcelorMittal's woes on an oversupply of finished products. I said that oversupply of finished product maybe from China, from India, but then also there's this problem with mini mills. All right, mini mills. These are small mills in South Africa. They produce long steel in the same way that ArcelorMittal produces long steel in South Africa. But these mini mills now, right, they're usually subsidized by the government, and they receive 8.5 billion rand in subsidies. But ArcelorMittal is not subsidized. All right, so we can see one of the reasons why ArcelorMittal CEO and the company is actually really angry with this, what he calls, you could hear him say, unfair taxes, unfair policies to them. I don't know, maybe because of the relationship they might have had with Jacob Zuma's regime, or I really don't know the basis for this issue, these taxes and surcharges. But anyway, it says that these mini mills, now what these mini mills do is that these mini mills use scrap metal as their own raw material. Okay, so in other words, mini mills produce long steel. ArcelorMittal produces long steel. ArcelorMittal needs, I think real steel products, all right, probably imported or something, to produce their own steel, while these mini mills, which are, remember, they are subsidized, all right, they need their raw materials, which is called scrap metal, to continuously produce their own steel. Now it says that, first of all, these mini mills use scrap metal as their raw material, which benefits from a price preference system which was introduced in 2013. So it's not only the fact that these mini mills are subsidized, but these raw materials, which are scrap metal, actually enjoy what is now here called price preferential system, PPS. It was introduced in 2013 to really make it easy to kind of like have continuous scrap metal available for, as a raw material to continuously produce steel by these mini mills. It says that this price preference system actually prohibits the export of scrap metal unless it had first been ordered to domestic consumers at a discount to the international price at the time of sale. In other words, this price preferential system, it really rejects or prevents the exportation of scrap metal, so that there's an availability and abundance of scrap metal in South Africa for the mini mills to continuously engage in the production of steel. But also remember that they are also subsidized. All right, so we see that this is a major competition to ArcelorMittal, which is firstly not subsidized, but secondly facing an influx of importation of finished steel products at very, very low tariffs. All right, and so we could see that ArcelorMittal is just really unable to compete with global standards, and so as at the end of the day, it must have been a business that constantly ran at a loss. All right, so it's really understandable why the CEO here, Verster, actually now recommended, these are his recommendations. First of all, Verster has called for higher duties on imported steel from China. It says that there's a possibility that this is the negotiations now. It says that there's a possibility that these duties being increased. There's a possibility of these duties being increased. So duties on imported steel from China, it could actually be increased to 15%. All right, but here is actually reminding us also that Mexico also imposed 80% tariffs on Chinese imports. So these are countries that actually have a strategic way of engaging with, liberalization and the global economy. Because if you do not protect your own industries, you're actually exposing your industries and your producers to really, denigration and, loss of jobs within the country. So Mexico imposed 80% tariffs on Chinese imports. We saw that Donald Trump even suggested that he would even have 100% or maybe even more than 100% tariff on Chinese cars, importation of cars into the United States, just to protect US industry. Brazil, which is now a major player in BRICS, all right, Brazil has 25% import 25% tariffs on Chinese imports, and also the UK, India, Japan, and many also have actually placed a percentage of tariffs to be able to stop Chinese products or Chinese imports from denigrating their own internal economy. And so this article is actually suggesting that it will be wise for South Africa to also engage in that, especially from the perspective of Verster, who actually argues that the massive importation of Chinese steel is actually a major problem to the collapse of the steel production by ArcelorMittal in South Africa. All right, so this is where I'll be stopping for this video. I really don't want it to be so long, but these are actually some of the major problems, the threats that are actually affecting ArcelorMittal, and why ArcelorMittal might actually consider leaving South Africa and actually departing with as much as 3,500 jobs, direct jobs, but also an extended 16,000 jobs, because most of the 16,000 jobs are dependent on the 3,500 direct and indirect jobs that are actually connected to AMSA itself. And so that will be a major blow. So imagine 16,000 plus 3,500, that's 19,500 individuals dumped into the already full, already frustrated, already bloated, unemployed and unemployable market in South Africa, to begin another race to find a job. I mean, that would be a disaster. So it's really wise that the GNU and the South African government really think strategically about these policies and how to redesign these tariffs to be able to protect the internal productive capacity of industries in South Africa going forward. But then I'll be stopping this video here. It's getting too long already. Share your thoughts. What do you think about this video and Verster, and Minister of Labor and Employment, and the whole problem with ArcelorMittal? Share your thoughts in the comments.